The room is silent, except for the clicking of a single pen. The glare of fluorescent lights washes over the hearing table where Jasmine Crockett sits, eyes locked on Jerome Powell. Cameras hum in quiet anticipation. Reporters hold their breath. Then her voice slices through the static. So you're telling us 6 trillion vanished and no one's responsible? The words hang in the air, sharp, surgical. Powell blinks once, twice. For a heartbeat, even the walls seem to tighten around the moment. The camera pans across the faces in the chamber. Aides shift uncomfortably. Someone clears their throat. Powell's mouth opens, but no sound escapes. The clock ticks. Crockett doesn't move. Her stillness is a force. Her silence heavier than accusation. She leans forward, barely an inch, but enough to turn the pressure up. This isn't debate. It's cross-examination. The chair's gavel hovers, hesitant to intervene. The nation watches in the pause between breath and confession. A low hum builds beneath the surface of the scene, the collective pulse of millions who've lived beneath decisions made in rooms like this one. Narration cuts through like a distant echo. What you're about to witness is not just an exchange, it's a collision between illusion and accountability. The camera lingers on Crockett's eyes, steady, unblinking, as if she's looking through Powell and into the entire system behind him. Every syllable she spoke wasn't a question. It was a mirror. Powell exhales slowly, the weight of $6 trillion settling between them like fog. "Congresswoman," he begins, voice carefully measured. "These are complex mechanisms," but she cuts in, voice low, certain, relentless. Mechanisms don't erase responsibility. People do. Somewhere in the back, a staffer looks down at their notes, realizing this moment will not be buried under jargon. It's already history. Outside, on live feeds and scrolling comment threads, the clip begins to spread before it even ends. Viewers lean closer to their screens. Something in her tone tells them this is the prelude to exposure, that this single sentence could unravel a system built on unspoken deals and economic amnesia. The hum becomes a roar, the sound of a nation realizing it's watching truth walk straight into power's temple. And as Powell shifts in his seat, searching for balance in a storm he didn't expect, the narrator's voice fades in, calm but electric. But how did we get to a moment where one question could shatter the illusion of economic control? Flashback. The image of that committee room fades into the wider storm outside. An economy in slow collapse disguised as control. Grocery store shelves gleam under brighter lights, but the prices glare even louder. A mother stares at a gallon of milk, her thumb swiping through her banking app like it might change the math. Gas stations hum with quiet frustration. Renters whisper across hallways about renewal notices that read like threats. This is the backdrop of Jerome Powell's calm testimony, a calm earned not by peace, but by distance.
Narration enters, measured but intimate. Where are you watching from right now? Because this isn't just DC. This is your grocery bill, your rent, your future. The lens shifts from marble hallways to kitchen tables. The hum of the Capitol fades into the rhythm of ordinary life stretched thin. The system says inflation is cooling. The people say their wallets are on fire. The contradiction is the wound. In that wound, Crockett stands as a translation between worlds. She doesn't quote the Fed's press releases. She quotes the people. "When your rates go up, my district feels it before your models do," she told reporters weeks before this hearing. Her words didn't trend then. They trend now because the consequences have caught up with the rhetoric. Each decimal point in Powell's report carries a heartbeat. A late bill, a dream deferred. Cameras capture the ritual of testimony, the shuffle of papers, the arcane vocabulary meant to blur lines of accountability. Powell speaks of market confidence, necessary corrections, monetary restraint, But outside those walls, the language translates differently. Layoffs, foreclosures, lost homes. Every euphemism bends like an insult to lived experience. And Crockett, seated among colleagues who mistake empathy for weakness, feels the tension between expert detachment and moral urgency coil inside her like a spring. The narration tightens its grip. In an era where financial power decides who can breathe without debt, one woman decided to stop listening to numbers that lied. Cut to the rising sound of social media chatter, digital outrage forming the background chorus of the people's trial. Commenters flood live streams. Finally, someone's asking what we're all thinking. She's the only one talking like a human. Make them explain it like Wren's due tomorrow. The story expands beyond the chamber. It becomes a collective confrontation. The flashback accelerates. We see Powell's face at past hearings, composed, mechanical, confident. He has repeated these lines for years, and no one dared press beyond the script. The economy bent around the Fed's invisible hand, but now the illusion trembles. Crockett represents that tremor, the embodied consequence of what technocrats call adjustment. She isn't simply speaking to him, she's channeling millions who never get a microphone. The camera pans back to the hearing table, back to the present moment, where the quiet tension from before now feels like the eye of a storm. The audience feels it too. This isn't abstract policy, it's personal survival disguised as fiscal discipline. And in that silence between his jargon and her question lies the truth everyone's been avoiding. The cost of denial is now measured in human lives.
The narrator's tone turns colder, prophetic. For years, he controlled the narrative from behind spreadsheets and headlines. But to understand the tremor, you have to meet the man who built the fault line. In the architecture of American power, few buildings echo like the Federal Reserve. The marble floors don't creak, they declare permanence. Every step through its corridors sounds rehearsed, every breath steeped in legacy. This is Jerome Powell's kingdom, a realm where numbers speak louder than names, and control is measured not in votes, but in interest rates. He walks those halls with the certainty of a man who has never been late on rent, never had to choose between groceries and gas, never had to explain an overdraft fee to his child. His confidence is quiet, but not humble. It's the silence of someone who believes the system's stability is proof of his own virtue. They call him a technocrat, polished, unshakable, fluent in the dialect of deflection. His sentences are long, layered in the comfort of vagueness. Temporary adjustments, targeted easing, soft landings. Each phrase designed not to clarify, but to contain. He learned long ago that complexity is a weapon, that if people can't understand the words, they won't challenge the meaning. His power depends on that distance. He sits at the intersection of consequence and indifference, unbothered by the chaos beneath the data he cites. In Powell's world, the economy isn't human, it's a model, an experiment. The suffering outside those marble walls becomes an acceptable side effect, collateral for control. They printed wealth like confetti and called it stability. When the storm came, the same hands that built the flood claimed to be the architect's rescue. Every bailout, every quantitative easing, every whispered deal behind closed doors. Powell presided with the calm of a man who had convinced himself that saving the powerful would somehow save the nation. The camera narrows to his expression during past crises. Always the same, composed, deliberate, performatively steady. The eyes of a man who knows that panic is contagious and his calm is the cure. But underneath that serenity, something stirs, a fear he will never name. It is the fear of exposure, the fear that one honest question could unravel the mythology he built around policy. He smiles for the cameras, that slight, knowing curve of the mouth that says he's survived worse. In truth, he hasn't. He simply never faced someone who speaks outside the script. Narration sharpens like a blade. Arrogance doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through a polished sentence, hides inside a confident pause, disguises itself as order. Powell's arrogance is not loud, it's procedural. It lives in the assumption that ordinary people won't notice, that their pain can be averaged out, that responsibility can be deferred behind the phrase market correction. When inflation hit like a tidal wave, Powell's press conference smile never wavered. He told the nation it was under control. But control for whom? Inside his private meetings, aides exchange cautious glances as he dictates language for statements that will ripple through global markets. Every comma can raise or crash a fortune, yet he never feels the tremor. His crisis management briefings are conducted in climate-controlled rooms while the country sweats under the weight of rising prices. The dissonance doesn't disturb him, it comforts him. He believes distance is professionalism, that empathy is weakness.
The camera pans across his office. Leather chairs, abstract art, the hum of silence money buys. He prefers muted tones, both in decor and discourse. Everything about Powell suggests composure as performance. But the cracks are there, the tightening of his jaw when pressed by an unplanned question, the subtle shift in tone when someone refuses to yield to his phrasing. For all his command of data, he is defenseless against conviction. And so when Jasmine Crockett enters that room, calm and deliberate, he assumes she will play by the same rules: polite inquiry, safe outrage, performative dissent. He mistakes her stillness for submission. He doesn't see that her calm is of a different nature. His calm is curated to protect power. Hers is honed to confront it. The narrator's voice lowers, the tempo slowing like a breath before fire. He believed composure made him untouchable. He didn't understand that composure, in the hands of the right woman, could become confrontation. The scene freezes on Powell's faint, habitual smirk, the one worn at every hearing, every headline, the one that says, "I'll outlast this too." But for the first time, that smirk meets silence that doesn't yield. The air between them hums with something unfamiliar. It's the sound of his certainty eroding. And opposite that marble calm stood a woman forged in fire. Before the marble halls and the viral clips, there was a woman walking down cracked sidewalks in South Dallas, legal pad in hand, sleeves rolled up, defending tenants who couldn't afford representation. Jasmine Crockett didn't come from the world of marble calm. She came from the world that marble floors were built on top of. Her office back then was a folding chair, a second-hand laptop, and a belief that justice was not a luxury. She didn't chase power, she chased fairness. And in a system allergic to accountability, that made her dangerous long before Congress ever knew her name. The people who came to her weren't case numbers. They were mothers, veterans, small business owners, all caught in the machinery of policies designed to look neutral but wound like traps. She listened, she learned, and she fought. There were nights when she fell asleep at her desk, surrounded by files stacked higher than her resolve could stretch, and still she woke up and kept going. Every victory, every dismissal, every landlord who backed down added another layer to her quiet armor. That armor wasn't made of cynicism or bitterness. It was made of endurance, the kind that only grows in the fire of everyday struggle. When she stepped into politics, it wasn't to trade the courtroom for the camera. It was to carry the stories no one else could tell into the rooms where those stories were written into law. She didn't read the numbers from a chart. She'd lived the consequences of those numbers. She'd seen what fiscal tightening looked like when it meant kids eating cereal for dinner and parents skipping medicine to make rent. She didn't need a statistic to understand suffering. She had names, faces, memories. Her colleagues in Congress often underestimated her because she didn't dress her conviction in performative outrage. Her power wasn't in how loud she spoke.
but in the way she made silence work for her. Her questions landed with surgical precision, her tone disarmed, her gaze unsettled. Even her pauses felt deliberate, as if she were giving her opponent one last chance to choose honesty before she exposed their deception. She learned early that truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand long enough to be heard. Narration deepens, cinematic and reverent. They call her the calm before the correction, because when Crockett enters a room, it's not fireworks that announce her, it's focus. Her calm is not a lack of fire, it's the control of it. She knows the system thrives on chaos and confusion, so she starves it of both. She speaks in clarity. She moves in purpose. And that terrifies people who depend on noise to stay in power. In interviews, she rarely raises her voice, but every time she speaks, there's an undertone that says she's tired of pretending the emperor has clothes. "I didn't come here to make friends," she once told a local station. "I came here to make sense." The statement went viral for a day, but it wasn't a slogan. It was a philosophy. In her world, composure isn't passivity. It's precision, weaponized. In committee hearings, she sits with her notepad open, but her attention sharper than any script. She studies every hesitation, every attempt to bury truth under acronyms. Her questions are traps disguised as grace. Powell's type, those who confuse authority with wisdom, never see it coming. Because Crockett never telegraphs her strike. She waits, listens, then chooses her moment with the discipline of a surgeon. Her mentors warned her early on that the higher she climbed, the colder it would get. But Crockett learned to generate her own heat. Her calm isn't born of privilege. It's the survival instinct of someone who's had to keep steady while the world around her burned. The confidence she carries into every hearing doesn't come from power. It comes from purpose. As the narrator's tone softens, the visual shifts to the contrast between her and Powell, his marble calm versus her human resolve. He protects the illusion of order. She embodies the truth that disrupts it. She is the anomaly the system can't categorize, too composed to dismiss, too sharp to silence, too genuine to corrupt. When she speaks, the noise in the room doesn't rise, it falls. Because everyone, even her opponents, know instinctively that something real is happening. In the weeks leading up to that hearing, Crockett studied every report, every chart, every euphemism Powell had ever uttered. But more importantly, she studied the people those reports ignored. She didn't prepare to perform, she prepared to pierce. Her staff didn't know it then, but she was already crafting the question that would redefine the moment. A single, unassuming sentence designed to slice through the language of illusion and expose what was left behind. On the morning of the hearing, as the cameras set up and the microphones tested, she arrived early, calm, composed, as if she'd already seen how this day would end. She sat quietly, reviewing her notes one last time, steady as a still lake before a storm. Every movement was measured, every breath aligned with intention. When she finally entered the chamber, Powell noticed her, but didn't register the danger. To him, she was another name on a schedule, another voice he could neutralize with numbers. But to everyone watching, something felt different. Her calm didn't blend into the marble backdrop. It disrupted it. It carried the charge of purpose that could turn policy into reckoning. And so, as she took her seat across from him, the air seemed to shift. Two versions of composure, two definitions of control, about to collide. The calm of privilege versus the calm of truth. The silence before the confrontation became deafening. When they finally met, the temperature in the room began to rise. Back in the hearing room, the lights seemed harsher, the air denser. Cameras whir quietly, recording every twitch, every inhale. Powell adjusts his glasses, his voice steady but tired, retreating behind the protective veil of abstraction. "We're observing temporary market realignments," he says, hands folded, tone even. His words drift like smoke, designed to obscure, not illuminate. The jargon flows smoothly. Quantitative easing, balance sheet normalization, moderating liquidity. It's the language of control, not clarity. Crockett doesn't flinch. She leans slightly forward, pen tapping once against her notepad. Temporary. Chair Powell, when exactly does temporary start feeling permanent to the people paying for it? Her tone isn't raised, it's sharpened. The sentence lands clean, quick, leaving no space for rhetorical escape. Powell blinks, the faintest pause before he replies. "Congresswoman, these are complex macroeconomic conditions." She cuts in, soft but surgical. "No, they're predictable consequences." A low murmur passes through the room. The chair clears his throat. Powell shifts his papers. Crockett continues, each question stripping another layer of his armor. "You say liquidity injection. I say bailout. You say market confidence. I say public risk. Who exactly was confident when $6 trillion disappeared into financial fog?" Her voice stays even, but the words slice like wire through tension. The rhythm builds, short, tight, precise. Powell exhales slowly, fingers tapping the table, a tell he doesn't realize the cameras catch. She asks again, this time quieter, as though she's giving him a final chance to tell the truth on his own. "Do you know what $6 trillion looks like in my district? It looks like medicine not bought, rent not paid, schools underfunded. You can call it policy. I call it pain." The silence that follows stretches just long enough for discomfort to take shape. Powell glances at the committee chair, but no one rescues him. He tries to regain rhythm. "Congresswoman, we have taken significant steps to ensure that the economy remains resilient." Crockett interjects. Resilient for who? The question echoes, a challenge without anger, just precision. Her eyes don't move. She's studying his evasions like data points. Each sentence he offers becomes another line tightening around him. The members on the dais shift uneasily. Some avert their eyes. Others glance at Powell with the same uneasy curiosity as spectators realizing they're watching a controlled demolition in real time. The tempo accelerates. Crockett presses again. "You claim accountability, so name one person who's been held responsible. One. For $6 trillion of mistakes." Powell hesitates. His throat tightens. "Well, these are institutional." She cuts in, faster now. "Institutional means everyone and no one." Convenient. The words are clipped, rhythmic, almost musical in their precision. She's not shouting, she's conducting. And with each exchange, the room's temperature rises.
A reporter's pen stops moving. The camera light intensifies on Powell's face. Sweat glints at his temple. The subtle tremor of his jaw betrays the calm exterior. He leans back, searching for his old authority, but the balance of power has already shifted. She's leading him somewhere, inch by inch, and the audience can feel it. There's no path forward that doesn't end with exposure. Crockett leans in again,
her voice dropping to near whisper. "Chair Powell, you've said this country's economy is fundamentally strong. Tell me, what's strong about debt, despair, and denial?" The question lands heavy, unanswerable. The committee chair looks uneasy but doesn't interrupt. Powell stares down, buying time that no longer exists. Narration slips in, almost inaudible. Each sentence, each pause, pulled him closer to the edge. The words he once used as shields now sounded like echoes in an empty chamber. Crockett waits. Powell clears his throat, but no defense comes. His composure frays at the edges. The hand that once gestured confidently now hovers uncertainly above his notes. She's dismantled the illusion without raising her voice. Every viewer can sense the trap tightening, the quiet choreography of intellect cornering power. A final exchange. "So," she says softly, "when we ask where 6 trillion went, are we supposed to be satisfied with 'the system works'?" Powell opens his mouth. No sound, just a shallow breath. The tension crystallizes into stillness. And then, silence. The kind of silence that only truth can create. 6 seconds of silence stretch like a held breath across the room. Every camera lens narrows its gaze. Every hand stills mid-note. Even the hum of the overhead light seems to lower itself, as though the air itself knows what's coming. Crockett leans forward, elbows resting lightly on the table, her eyes locked on Powell. The stillness is not absence, it's pressure. The kind that builds before a fault line breaks. Powell swallows, a small sound magnified by the quiet. A pen taps once, somewhere near the back row. The sound echoes like a heartbeat, counting down the inevitable. Crockett speaks, her voice measured, calm, unhurried. "Chair Powell, if your policies strengthened the system, why did $6 trillion make the rich richer and leave working families fighting to survive?" No embellishment, no preamble, just the question. The one no chart, no model, no economic euphemism can hide behind. It lands clean, precise, and irreversible. Powell blinks. His mouth opens slightly, but the words don't arrive. His composure fractures, not visibly enough to call it panic, but unmistakably enough that the spell of authority shatters. The seconds crawl. His jaw works once, twice. The microphones pick up the faintest breath.
Crockett doesn't move. Her stillness is strategy. The longer she waits, the louder the silence becomes. The room bends around it, the journalists, the staffers, the aides trying not to react. One man in the second row lowers his head, pretending to adjust his tie. The chair shifts in his seat, as though the pause itself has become a physical weight. Finally, Powell exhales, a crack in the marble calm. "Congresswoman." His voice is softer now, stripped of its practiced certainty. "In hindsight, yes, certain measures may have contributed to widening disparities." The words hang there, trembling, before they register. Then, like the first sound after an explosion, the room exhales all at once. The low murmur of disbelief ripples outward. Journalists begin to move again, fingers hammering keyboards, recorders sliding closer to the microphones. The faint whir of camera zooms fills the air. Powell's face stiffens. He realizes what he's just said. It's too late. Narration cuts through, crisp and unrelenting. And in that moment, the illusion cracked. The language of balance sheets and confidence indices gave way to the plain weight of truth. The empire of euphemism had named its own fault. Crockett's expression doesn't shift into triumph. Instead, there's something quieter, an almost sorrowful restraint. She looks at him, not with glee, but with the recognition of inevitability. This wasn't victory. It was verification. The thing everyone suspected, finally spoken aloud. The camera lingers on her face, composed, unreadable,
the calm of someone who doesn't need to celebrate what was already obvious. Across the dais, aides glance nervously toward their bosses. Phones light up with notifications as clips begin to circulate. A journalist whispers, "Did he just admit it?" Another answers without looking up. "It's on record." One staffer in the corner mouths a silent curse as he texts his comms team. The sound design tightens. The background hum fades. We hear the slow rhythm of typing, the flick of camera shutters, the scrape of Powell's chair as he shifts. The echo of the pen tap returns. Once, twice, each hit slower, heavier. Crockett gathers her papers without looking away from him. She doesn't need to say another word. The room is already speaking for her. Narration rises, layered over the subtle chaos. That's how truth lands, not with applause, but with the sound of certainty collapsing. Powell tries to recover. "If I could clarify," he begins, but the sentence dies halfway. His microphone catches the hollow timbre of regret. Crockett rises slowly, each motion deliberate. Her expression is firm, almost maternal in its disappointment. She looks at him once more. "Clarify it for who?" she asks, softly. "The markets or the people who believed you?" He doesn't answer. He can't. The silence returns, deeper now, an aftermath silence, the kind that follows revelation. The cameras stay trained on them both, the architect of the illusion and the woman who dismantled it without raising her voice. For the audience, it's no longer policy, it's morality. The narration settles to a near whisper. 6 seconds, one question, and the illusion of control collapsed under its own weight.
A journalist's voice cuts faintly in the background. "We've got it. It's live." Somewhere, a notification chime pings, marking the beginning of virality. Clips flood timelines, headlines bloom within minutes. The phrase, "Crockett versus Powell," trends before he even leaves the room. The exchange becomes more than testimony. It becomes testament. Powell lowers his gaze, papers trembling slightly in his hand. The light catches the sheen of sweat along his temple. Crockett turns away, steps steady, movements unhurried. Her silence says what her words no longer need to. That accountability isn't won in the moment, it's earned in the echo. As she exits, the camera lingers on the vacant chair she leaves behind, the microphone still faintly humming, catching the air's unsettled quiet. Narration delivers the final line, resonant, cinematic. That was the moment noise met consequence. But the echo didn't stop in that room. It spread. The moment the clip hit the internet, it was no longer just a hearing. It was history. Within minutes, timelines ignited. Hashtag Crockett exposes the Fed, hashtag 6 trillion mistake, and hashtag truth over trillions began their climb up the trending charts. The video spread like voltage through the digital bloodstream of a restless nation. 6 seconds of silence became 6 million views before the hour was out. Every edit, every slow-motion replay, every subtitle sync caught the same thing. The exact instant Jerome Powell blinked, and the illusion cracked. TikTok feeds lit up with remixes. Some cut her question against dramatic orchestral drops. Others overlaid her words on footage of grocery stores, gas pumps, and rent notices. She said what we've all been screaming for years, one caption read, pulling over 500,000 likes overnight. Memes bloomed. Powell frozen mid-stammer beside captions like, "When accountability loads," and $6 trillion, 404 not found. But beyond the humor pulsed something deeper, an emotional current that didn't fade with the scroll. Cable networks scrambled.
News anchors leaned toward their monitors, voices trembling with that mix of disbelief and admiration reserved for political moments too clean to ignore. "It's rare to see a question dismantle an entire narrative," one host said. On another channel, a conservative commentator, usually allergic to giving ground, shook his head and admitted, "I don't agree with her politics, but she had a point." It was the closest thing to confession some viewers had ever heard. Economists began their post-mortems, flooding podcasts and morning shows with analyses that tried to contain the blow. They cited models, timelines, theoretical frameworks, but all their graphs couldn't flatten the emotional impact. Ordinary people weren't debating macroeconomic nuance. They were talking about justice. For the first time, the word inequality wasn't abstract. It had a face, a voice, a timestamp. Activists seized the momentum. That $6 trillion wasn't numbers. It was meals skipped, homes lost, futures postponed, a grassroots organizer said on livestream, echoing Crockett's tone. Donations to community economic coalitions surged overnight. Hashtags transformed into organizing tools. The clip wasn't just viral, it was catalytic. The question became a rallying cry. Who pays for the mistakes of power? Powell's PR team moved fast, but speed couldn't outrun truth. Within hours, a carefully worded statement emerged. Chair Powell's remarks were taken out of context. The Federal Reserve remains committed to equitable growth. The internet responded in unison. The full video was context. Comment sections filled with timestamps, annotated transcripts, receipts of pain translated into data points of outrage. Every attempt to contain the fallout only amplified it. By the second day, the moment had leapt from screens into reality. Protesters outside the Federal Reserve carried signs reading, "Where's the $6 trillion?" and "Accountability has a name." Morning commuters glanced up at digital billboards replaying Crockett's question on loop, the audio stripped to silence, the subtitle glowing like a verdict. Political strategists scrambled to measure the shift. Approval numbers began to tilt. Progressive figures praised Crockett as a truth-teller in a hall built on pretense. Editorial boards debated whether this was a one-off flash or the beginning of a new political language, one that refused to speak in code when people were drowning in its consequences. Meanwhile, Crockett stayed quiet. No grand victory tour, no self-congratulatory posts, just a brief tweet. Truth doesn't trend, it surfaces. It went viral anyway. Her restraint became part of her legend. Commentators described her as the calm in the storm she created. Artists painted murals. Students quoted her line in debate clubs. Economists began citing her in op-eds about monetary accountability, the irony so sharp it could cut glass. And through it all, the people watching from living rooms and bus stops felt something unusual: ownership. Her victory didn't feel distant or performative. It felt participatory. The clip wasn't just hers, it was theirs. In her steadiness, they saw a reflection, not representation. It was a moment that told them power could be spoken to, and it could stumble. Narration closes the loop, slow and steady. When systems forget who they serve, truth arrives dressed as simplicity. One question, one pause, one admission that rippled beyond marble halls into every kitchen and paycheck across the country. By the week's end, economists were still debating policy. The people had already decided meaning. The echo of Crockett's question had turned into a movement's pulse. And when the dust settled, one truth remained: integrity doesn't flinch. The hearing room sits empty now. Chairs pushed back, microphones silenced, the scent of old paper and new consequence lingering in the air. Hours have passed, but the moment refuses to fade. The echo of that question, 6 words that stripped the veneer from power still hums beneath the marble. Crockett remained seated, just for a breath longer, her gaze on the nameplate before her. She doesn't smile. She doesn't need to. The silence is enough. Later, in a quiet hallway lined with portraits of those who spoke before her, she pauses. Cameras flash from a distance, but she doesn't turn toward them. Her expression is reflective, almost tender. If 6 trillion can vanish, maybe it's time we redefine who's worth saving. The words are half meditation, half manifesto. They aren't aimed at the microphones, they're aimed at the future. Narration rises, steady and reverent. She didn't speak louder, she spoke clearer. And clarity, in a world addicted to noise, is the rarest form of rebellion. The tone slows, giving weight to each phrase, as if language itself must earn its way into memory. That day, the illusion of expertise bowed to the authority of truth. We see Powell exiting the chamber in the archival footage, his face drawn, his steps slower, the weight of exposure settling across his shoulders. For years he had been the calm constant, the voice of control. But control, stripped of conscience, is just choreography. His tie is still straight, his composure technically intact, but the camera captures what posture can't hide, a man who has been unmasked by simplicity. Meanwhile, Crockett walks in the opposite direction. No entourage, no spectacle, just quiet certainty. Staffers pass her, nodding slightly, unsure if they're witnessing an ending or a beginning. The narration continues, weaving imagery through reflection. In that room, data met humanity. For once, policy felt the pulse it forgot. Clips replay across the nation, but now they carry a different weight. Viewers no longer see a confrontation, they see a mirror. Each household hears the question in their own context. Rent overdue, savings eroded, opportunity delayed. Her composure has become their courage, her restraint, their rebellion. As the days pass, pundits attempt to reframe the event, to intellectualize it, to dissect it until it feels small enough to manage. But it resists containment, because what she said wasn't just political, it was personal, it was moral, it was human. And humanity, once awakened, doesn't easily go back to sleep. Narration deepens. Every generation has a moment when truth demands a voice willing to risk being dismissed as defiant. Crockett didn't raise her voice to be heard. She raised it to remind us we still can be. Back in her office, she places her notes in a drawer and closes it gently. The sound is soft, final, but charged with continuity. Through the window, the city hums, indifferent, alive, changed. Her reflection overlays the Capitol dome. For the first time in a long time, it looks less like a monument and more like a promise. Powell's interviews fade into the noise of damage control, but Crockett's line remains, replayed in classrooms, podcasts, and kitchen table conversations. It's no longer a moment, it's a measure, the standard by which courage will be weighed. The camera pans out, her figure framed by the fading afternoon light, narration closing the arc. In a time when truth bends under pressure, she stood still, and in that stillness, the world found motion again. The music swells, subtle, orchestral, more elegy than anthem. The image freezes on her walking toward the light spilling from the doorway, her silhouette a quiet defiance against the dimming chamber behind her. Because in the end, it wasn't just her question, it was our awakening. This was more than a question, it was a mirror held up to power. $6 trillion vanished, and one voice refused to look away. Jasmine Crockett didn't just ask a question, she demanded accountability. And in doing so, she reminded every one of us that truth cannot be negotiated or silenced. The stakes were enormous, the consequences real, and the lesson timeless. Vigilance matters, and courage has a sound all its own. If you believe truth still matters, If you believe accountability is not optional, then carry this forward. Share this moment. Subscribe, stay loud, and let your voice echo where silence has ruled too long. The question she asked belongs to all of us, because the fight for clarity, for fairness, for justice, it isn't finished. Let it resonate. Let it linger. Let it remind us that power may posture, but integrity never flinches. The music swells, a slow, deliberate beat, as the image fades, leaving behind the pulse of conviction and the promise of accountability still to come.